I'd like to share a story from my past that still weighs heavily on my heart. It's an experience I wish I had skipped, but as we all know, life isn't easy. This story began years ago when I was just 18, living with my family in the vibrant yet complex city of London. At that time, I thought I had everything, my family was well, and both my parents were successful professionals who always carved out time for me and my two older brothers, Max and James. Growing up as the youngest, I was spoiled, receiving both tangible affection and love that lingered beneath the surface. Yet, even amidst this abundance, I often felt that the love from my parents wasn't the same as the unwavering support I received from Max and James. They were not just my brothers, they were my protectors, constantly looking after me with actions that spoke volumes. While my parents provided a comfortable life, Max and James understood me in ways that nurtured my spirit. I recall moments when I faced challenges, like the time I came home in tears after being teased at school. Max and James were my first line of defense, and I still remember the calm strength of my parents as they stepped in to address the situation without resorting to anger, but with words that reassured me. Their support, both gently firm and fiercely protective, helped me feel safe despite the harshness of the world outside our home. Our family evenings were warm moments, filled with laughter as I nestled between my brothers on the sofa. They would playfully fight for the privilege of sitting beside me, calling me their little princess and declaring it their lifelong duty to protect me. Their affectionate teasing made me feel cherished and helped me navigate the awkwardness of growing up. James educated me on self-love, while Max helped me find my style, always reminding me of my beauty, something that struck a chord deep within me. In those years, their presence was a steadying force. They took me to school, helped with homework, and kept me company during sleepless nights, welcoming me with open arms while soothing my worries with silly stories. Their gestures may have seemed small, yet they wrapped me in a blanket of comfort that I felt cherished by them in a way that was deeper than what I received from my parents. However, that love, which felt so pure, gave way to my greatest regret, a regret that transformed my life forever when I turned 18. I wish to recount that part of my story, a tale that requires more courage to tell and perhaps even deeper understanding from those who hear it. Navigating my youthful ignorance, I often acted carefree, allowing myself to be silly and impulsive, jumping into my brother's laps without a second thought. One warm summer afternoon, the sun cascaded into our living room as I stepped out of my bedroom, drawn by the sight of Max and James on the couch, deeply engrossed in their TV show. I approached quietly, my eyes rubbing away the remnants of sleep, and grinned when I realized they hadn't noticed me yet, momentarily savoring the warmth of our easy bond. I jumped onto the sofa and plopped down on Max and James's laps. Max jolted while James chuckled, "Little sister, what are you up to?" I merely giggled and nestled my head onto Max's shoulder. "What are you two watching so intently?" I asked, a playful curiosity bubbling up inside me. They hesitated to respond, and as I glanced at the TV, I realized it displayed a romantic film. At that moment, the movie reached its climax, featuring a deeply emotional scene where the characters embraced passionately before sharing a kiss. Sensing my interest, Max and James shifted uncomfortably. James quickly covered my eyes with his hand and said, "Don't look, Grace." "This isn't a movie for kids," I laughed, wriggling out of his grasp. "I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 18, I teased, my playful tone masking the nervousness stirring within me. Despite his attempts to shield my eyes, I stole a glimpse through James's fingers, still chuckling as I teased them. To steady myself, I instinctively shifted my hand onto James's thigh. I didn't know if it was intentional, but my fingers brushed against something solid in his pocket. A wave of curiosity washed over me, even as I felt laughter bubbling up. When I felt that warmth, my heart began to race, and suddenly, I yanked my hand back, embarrassment flooding my cheeks. I couldn't look at either of them. "I'm sorry," I stuttered before leaping to my feet and running to my room, slamming the door behind me. Sitting on my bed, I felt a rush of warmth and pressure in my chest, as if I had done something gravely wrong. A surge of shame enveloped me. Was I overreacting? Had it truly been an accident? The sensation of brushing against James's pocket played in my mind, leaving my cheeks flush. I couldn't shake the feeling. It felt like I had crossed an unspoken boundary, one I thought was unbreakable, but now seemed fragile. That evening, as I mustered the courage to venture downstairs, I felt a lingering unease, unsure of how Max and James would perceive what had happened. Would they laugh at my embarrassment? I crept quietly down the hallway, trying to avoid making eye contact. Upon reaching the living room, I paused to listen, relieved to find it empty, which made me wonder whether they had forgotten about earlier events. But as I stepped inside, the room was still void of company. How strange, I thought, hesitating by the sofa where I had sat earlier, trying to find my bearings. Just then, James's voice broke through the silence. "What are you doing, Grace?" he called out, startling me. I jumped, and Max erupted into laughter. "You look like a thief!" I turned around in surprise, and my heart raced at their sudden appearance. "You two scared me half to death," I exclaimed, attempting to feign anger but unable to stifle my laughter. "What about you? You look like you're up to something," teased Max, raising his eyebrows playfully. "You're not planning to do anything, are you?" James added, giving my head a gentle pat. I stood there, half startled and half amused, my heart slowly settling as the light moment lifted my spirits. I laughed along with Max and James, feeling the earlier awkwardness begin to dissolve. What I had touched couldn't have been what I thought it was, otherwise they wouldn't be laughing like this. That realization brought me some relief as I tried to act as if nothing had happened. "What are you two doing behind me? Were you trying to scare me?" I asked, attempting to shift the conversation. Max shrugged with a mock-serious expression. "Yeah, I just wanted to scare you a little. I didn't expect you to jump so much," James added with a grin. "Who would have thought you'd leap like that? Your face was priceless!" We all burst into laughter, and in that moment, the tension finally melted away. James clapped a hand on my shoulder. "All right, let's go. The whole family's waiting for you." I smiled and nodded, following them into the kitchen where everyone had gathered. My parents greeted me with warm smiles, and I settled into my seat at the table, comforted by the gentle warm light surrounding us. Dinner was filled with laughter. My parents discussed their work as Max and James occasionally teased me with light-hearted jokes. I joined in, sharing a few jests of my own, and the earlier embarrassment faded away. After dinner, I helped my mother with the dishes, and then I retreated to my room to prepare for bed. As I lay there that night, reminiscing about the day's events, the remnants of embarrassment lingered, but anxiety had faded. I smiled to myself, reassuring myself that everything would be okay. Max and James were still the best brothers I could ever have, and with that thought, I sank into a peaceful sleep, convinced the worst was behind me. However, I was acutely aware that my room was just a thin wall away from theirs. Even the slightest noise, whether from a movie or music, could permeate through those fragile barriers. It had been a rare morning when I woke up early at 7 a.m. I was usually known for sleeping in, but that day was different. Perhaps I had stirred from a dream I couldn't remember, or maybe sunlight streaming through the curtains had startled me. As I became more alert, I noticed an unusual sound coming from the next room. Our house had a traditional layout with thin walls. Noises from my brother's rooms often seeped through. I was accustomed to the sounds of James chatting or gaming, but this morning was unlike anything I had heard before. It was quiet, yet insistent. At first, I assumed they were watching an action movie. Yet, as moments passed, a sinking feeling settled over me. The noises weren't the usual rattling of an action flick, they were sporadic, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, and my heart began to race. My cheeks felt flushed, as I desperately wished to dismiss the implications of what I was hearing. It wasn't music or casual banter, it was a symphony of rapid, intimate sounds mixed with heavy, labored breathing. My embarrassment intensified as the realization settled in. They must be watching something for older audiences. I squirmed under the weight of the discovery, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I pressed my hands to my face, attempting to shield myself from the invading thoughts. "This is private," I scolded myself, even though the reality of it felt surreal. Despite my efforts, the sounds from their room seemed to rise in intensity, haunting the air around me. What was once an intimate bond felt abruptly complicated, and I was caught in a web of discomfort and surprise. I didn't want to hear it, but curiosity gnawed at me as the noise persisted. Sitting up in bed, I quietly opened my door. Unsure of what to do, an unsettling unease bubbled within me, making it difficult to remain still. Slowly, I made my way down the hall, striving to tread as quietly as possible. As I approached their door, the noise emanating from within was so loud that it felt as though the walls were merely an illusion, offering no real separation. Embarrassment washed over me, my heart raced in my chest, and confusion muddled my thoughts. I paused outside, a mix of anxiety and curiosity swirling inside me. The thought that this was likely a common experience for many did little to calm my nerves. Hearing it from Max and James's room felt entirely different. Unsure of my next move, I bit my lip, wavering between retreating and remaining. In a moment of boldness, I pressed my ear against the door, attempting to regulate my breathing. But the sounds pouring out seemed to evaporate all rational thought. My instincts pulled me in two directions. Part of me wanted desperately to flee, yet another part was magnetized, captivated by the noise. Suddenly, the door swung open, and I instinctively took a step back, startled. There stood James, eyes wide with surprise, clearly caught off guard. We faced each other in a silence that stretched heavy between us, stifling, punctuated only by the thudding of my pulse. After what felt like an eternity, James broke the tension, his voice shaky. "Grace, what's going on?" he asked, almost as if he had forgotten how to speak. "Are you doing that standing up?" He looked away, the flush coloring his cheeks, betraying his embarrassment. I felt the heat creeping up my own face as I lowered my gaze. Our mutual nervousness was palpable, making our interaction feel clumsy and awkward. I forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace, nervous and uncertain. "Ah!" came a hesitant sound from James, as if the simple utterance could dissolve the tension. I remained silent, staring down at my fidgeting hands. Then Max emerged from behind James, his expression mirroring the unease that hung in the air. He too was visibly embarrassed, the flush of his cheeks adding to the awkward tableau. I looked away, suddenly feeling small. With a quiet voice, I mumbled, "I'm sorry." Max met my gaze only briefly before looking away. The bubble of our shared discomfort felt impenetrable, and I fidgeted with my hair, trying to mask my unease. "I was just passing by," I stammered, my voice tremulous. "Nothing, I'm leaving." I turned abruptly and hurried back to my room, anxious to escape the bewildering situation. I felt their eyes follow me, but I dared not glance back. Once inside, I closed the door, leaning against it to catch my breath. My heart still raced. I felt as if I had stumbled upon an intimate moment that wasn't meant for my eyes. The embarrassment clung to me, and the image of James and Max staring in surprise replayed in my mind, a haunting echo of that moment. As I stood there, taking deep breaths to steady the chaos inside, I reflected on the unusual circumstances of my evening. The weight of awkwardness lingered, and I couldn't shake the nagging thought that our relationships might never be the same. A knock shattered the silence, and dread filled my stomach. I knew it couldn't be my parents. They typically entered without knocking. My heart sank. It had to be one of them. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself before opening the door. James stood there, visibly uncomfortable, his gaze cast down as his fidgeting hands betrayed his nervousness. "Grace, I'm really sorry about earlier," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think. We were just watching a movie. Maybe the timing wasn't right." I could see the uncertainty in his expression, mirrored by Max, who appeared just as uneasy, shifting his gaze between us as he sought the right words. We sat in a heavy silence, each of us grappling with the weight of the moment, trying to navigate the unexpected turn our evening had taken. I could sense the tension in the room. James was visibly nervous while Max made a valiant effort to conceal his own discomfort. It felt as though we were caught in a delicate web of unspoken words, each of us trying to maneuver our way past this awkward moment. The silence hung heavy, and I knew we needed to break it before our unease spiraled further. With a tentative smile, I attempted to act casual, though the atmosphere crackled with tension. "Come on, guys!" "I didn't mean it," I said, forcing a lighthearted tone into my words. "Don't look so tense, okay?" I repeated myself, wishing to reassure them that the awkwardness would pass. Max and James exchanged a glance, a silent conversation swirling between them. After a moment, James let out a sigh, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "Really, Grace? You're okay with this? You're not uncomfortable?" I quickly nodded, hoping to ease their concerns. "Yeah, I'm fine, honestly." It was a lie, of course. We were all tangled up in our discomfort. "How about we sit down and talk?" I suggested, attempting to clear the air. To my surprise, they seemed taken aback, but eventually nodded in agreement. We moved to my room, an unspoken agreement hanging between us. I settled onto the bed, the weight of the moment palpable. In an effort to lighten the mood, I turned to Max and teased, "So the movie was so good you both lost track of time?" Max let out an awkward laugh, covering his face with his hands. "Come on, Grace, stop teasing me. It's just that we didn't expect you to hear." I raised my eyebrows playfully. "I thought you guys turned it up so I could hear." Laughter spilled between us, the tension gradually melting as we shared in this moment of levity. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I glanced at Max and James, wondering if I should voice the thought that crossed my mind. Gathering my courage, I broke the rhythm of our laughter. "How about we try something like in the movie?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, a mixture of hope and apprehension coursing through me. Both boys stared at me, disbelief etched on their faces. "Are you serious?" James asked, a blend of surprise and confusion lacing his voice. I nodded, attempting to maintain an air of seriousness. "It would be nice to try, wouldn't it?" I murmured, not daring to meet their eyes directly. Max shook his head firmly, his discomfort palpable. No, it wouldn't. The atmosphere thickened as they both turned away, but inside, I felt a spark of determination. I squeezed their hands gently, seeking reassurance for us all. Just try it once. I want to know what it feels like. The silence that followed felt eternal until James finally sighed, breaking it. Okay, but just this once, and we keep it a secret. No one can know. His voice was low, heavy with the weight of boundaries newly defined. As we began, the room was filled with a quiet intensity, our breaths a soft symphony in the stillness. Time lost its shape, the outside world faded until it was just the three of us. When it was over, a gentle light filled the space, and a peaceful silence enveloped us. We lay next to each other, breathing in the aftermath of our connection. Eventually, we headed to the kitchen to prepare lunch. The air now surprisingly natural, as if nothing had changed. Yet, deep down, we all knew something significant had shifted. As we sat down to eat, I felt a lightness in my heart. James smiled at me, his gaze warm. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded, returning his smile. I'm fine. I think I love you both even more now, I confessed, feeling a blush creep onto my cheeks. James held my hand, his eyes soft. And I love you too. In that moment, as we shared our meal, an unspoken understanding settled among us. Our relationship had transformed, but with it came not regret, only the promise of a deeper bond. An unspoken bond connected us, a profound understanding lying just beneath the surface. Since that day, everything shifted, though articulating that change was a challenge. Our relationship had crossed an invisible line, evolving into something more complex and nuanced. Each glance exchanged carried a new layer of understanding, a deeper connection that required no words. We both sensed this change, evident in the way we looked at one another, yet felt compelled to keep it unaddressed. Despite our closer ties, I wrestled with an unsettling truth. We had transcended certain boundaries, surrendering to youthful curiosity. While this deepened our bond, it also cast a shadow on my conscience. I knew that something fundamental had shifted between us. Our connection felt special, yet undeniably wrong. The gravity of our actions weighed heavily on me. Even if unintentional, we had altered the very fabric of our relationship, leaving behind a sense of guilt that lingered in the air. Looking back at that moment still sends a twinge of anxiety through me. The awkwardness between us has yet to fully fade. Whenever I catch a glimpse of Max or James, I detect the palpable tension that coils just below the surface. We agreed, without ever articulating it, to move on, yet our interactions have transformed. They're tinged with caution and tenderness, as if they're both protecting me and acknowledging the change. Each time I gaze into their eyes, my heart races, a cocktail of exhilaration and trepidation coursing through my veins. Our youthful curiosity led us down an unexpected path, one fraught with emotions we weren't prepared to confront. The strength of our connection is undeniable, yet it has also become entangled and complicated. I realize now how impulsive and immature my actions were. Emotions, guided by curiosity, crossed boundaries that should have remained intact. While I don't regret the experience, I cannot dismiss the shadow of guilt that follows me. I'm still navigating through this learning process, striving to become a better person. This journey has taught me that curiosity, while natural, can lead us into perilous territories we never meant to enter. The outcome of our choices diverged from our hopes, leaving us to face the repercussions. Life's boundaries serve to protect us, not to imprison us, but to guide our decisions and help us avoid regret. To anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, I urge you to pause and reflect before acting on strong emotions. Temporary curiosity can cloud your judgment and lead to irreversible decisions that jeopardize cherished relationships. When faced with intense feelings, step back and consider the long-term consequences. Relationships, built on trust, respect, and understanding, deserve your care. True love doesn't require reckless actions to validate its strength. It flourishes through responsibility. This is the most vital lesson I've learned, and I sincerely wish the best for all of you.